Hello, CastleVania fans, old and new. That's enough of that. Here's a quick too long didn't watch for this video. It can be boiled down to this. This is a collection of 4 CastleVania games, 3 of which I've played through multiple times, and 1 of which I don't quite play as much as I probably should do because it's also great. Go out and buy this collection on whatever format you want. It's a bargain. There's hundreds of hours of entertainment here. I love them. That is roughly all you need to know on that part, so what I'm going to do from here is explain just what it is you're getting with this pack, what enhancements there are, if any, and I don't know, maybe like a picture I drew to celebrate how great it is or something. So what I'm going to do with this video is just explain what you're getting. For those who have no idea what all this CastleVania malarkey is about, because truth be told, there's probably quite a few people out there who haven't touched a single one of Konami's 30-odd CastleVania games. Even those of you who have, you may have played a version of CastleVania that plays absolutely nothing like another one. These games are a strange beast, so let's get that out of the way first, shall we? If you want to break the series down into 2 different formats, ignoring the 3D outings, then you've got classic Castlevania, in which the game takes a fairly linear route through the levels from start to end, and you have the awkwardly named Metroidvania Castlevanias. This is one reason why the term Metroidvania doesn't really work, because in order to even understand what it means, you have to play either Metroid or some of the Castlevania games. So to put it in even less complicated terms, Metroidvanias are more open-ended journeys in which you'll typically have to navigate through a huge single level over time, rather than smaller singular levels. You'll typically have a few routes you can take, and these branch out as you get more and more powers, which let you traverse new areas. So here we have 4 games overall, 3 of which fall into the Metroidvania category. These are the Game Boy Advance titles, Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance, and Aria of Sorrow, and the final game falls squarely into the classic Castlevania format, Dracula X. Let's talk about those 3 Game Boy Advance games first, because they're the easiest 3 to lump together. In terms of which is better than another, that's a very difficult thing to nail down, because no matter what anyone says, someone else will chime in to disagree. Search online for any best Castlevania games list, and I can guarantee the chances of them lining up from outlet to outlet, it's slim at best. Each of these games offers a similar scenario, but each of them have their own little quirks and mechanics, and it makes them unique in their own right. Let me just say that all 3 of them, each and every one, is worth experiencing, and if you like any of them, then you'll typically find something to like or love in the others. So with that being said, it'd be completely pointless of me to try and rank these in terms of best to worst. Aria of Sorrow, Harmony of Dissonance, Circle of the Moon, don't at me. For those who are familiar with these games already, you'll know what each of these games bring, but what does the remaster bring? Well, quite a bit. All of it is fairly rudimentary and what you'd expect, but also this is Konami we're talking about, so what you'd expect isn't necessarily always going to be there. Thankfully, in this case, yes it is, and they've done a great job of bringing the Game Boy Advance games to the full screen with a hefty set of options, from pixel perfect ratio to, oh god, why would you do this? Stop. There's save options, rewind options, which you absolutely should not use unless you've just beaten a boss and fell down a hole by accident. I'll only allow it at that point, but otherwise no, don't use that. You'll lose any sense of progression here if you save scum your way through, but whatever. You can play the games in any way you like, just don't do it wrong. There's also an encyclopedia, a music player, and you can select the ROM region you play the game in if you're a Japanese person or a weeb. It's a pretty fleshed out set of what are probably ROMs running in an emulator. I don't know if they are or not. I said probably. They probably are, unless they're not. There's even this weird feature called Gadget, which I don't think is quite working as intended, or if it is, it's stupidly implemented. It should be a pretty neat feature that shows you where you can get collectibles from. For instance, in Circle of the Moon, and similarly in Aria of Sorrow, it'll tell you when you hit an enemy if there's a chance they'll drop a rare item, something you wouldn't have known in the original version. But it pops up every single goddamn time you hit the thing. I don't need to see the tooltip every single time I hit it, do I? I know, I get it. So that's what you get with this new fancy updated version. Oh, and you can also put this delightful wallpaper in the background. I can't believe I forgot that. That's obviously the main reason for this re-release. Fancy features out of the way, what about the games themselves? The basics are going to be the same in each of the GBA games, so for those not in the know, it generally goes like this. You set off on a quest in a castle, and you'll typically have no real idea where to go or what to do, but you will be able to press forward in a number of directions. You may come across a boss or a special item, and finding either of these things generally means you're headed in the right direction. Special items will typically give you a new move that you can perform, whether that be a sliding move or a double jump, or the ability to bounce off walls. Everything you gain in this manner is specifically designed to open up new areas of the castle. Places you visited before and had no idea how to bypass are now available for you to explore, and this is where the game begins to flourish as you explore deeper and deeper, opening up this huge set of rooms to explore and mine for delicious treasures. Added on top of all that is a basic RPG system. You will typically gain XP as you fight enemies and level up when you reach a certain threshold. You'll find items which increase your maximum health or mana or hearts. Mana is used for spells and hearts are used for sub-weapons. You may wonder why hearts are used for sub-weapons, and I seem to remember it's because Nintendo didn't want anything religious in their NES games, and they were originally crosses, but now I can't find anything on the internet that agrees with me on that, so I'm just going to carry on assuming that's exactly what it was based on with no evidence whatsoever, just a hazy memory that I may or may not have made up, but I definitely didn't. I'm 100% sure that's why. Probably. Sub-weapons are pretty staple in the CastleVania series until Aria of Sorrow throws a spanner in the works, which I'll explain later, and they can be useful in a pinch. Holding up and pressing attack will use whichever sub-weapon you're currently carrying, and it'll reduce a proportional amount of hearts from your total. These can be anything from axes that fly up in an arc, throwing daggers, and what I assume is holy water, but was probably called something different like hot danger water, just in case Nintendo came after them with pitchforks, because they definitely do that. Nintendo hates all religions equally. Probably, honestly I don't know anymore. That's the basics then, but there's some pretty big differences between all the games themselves. Circle of the Moon, for instance, is by far the hardest of the 3 Game Boy Advance games, and has a much heavier reliance on grinding. You will regularly hit a brick wall when you come up against bosses, and this doesn't seem half as prevalent in the later 2 games, where leveling just seems to come a bit more naturally. You'll also need to grind for cards, which are the biggest mechanical change. You'll need at least 2 cards before you can even begin to use them, but essentially you have to fight an enemy over and over again until it decides it wants to drop a card. And then you can take 1 card from the top row here, 1 from the bottom row here, activate your special power, and they'll do different things, some of which are pretty good and others don't really seem to do that much at all. I really like the idea behind this system, but in practice I find it a bit of an arseache to experiment with. Going into this sub-menu and selecting a new set of cards to try out just isn't as snappy as it could be, and requiring the player to grind for random drops just feels joyless. The biggest issue I have with CastleVania Circle of the Moon is that it feels a lot slower than its younger brothers. Movement is slow, the castle layout isn't quite as refined and prone to dead ends, and I just don't get that same hit as I do from other games. It was the first Game Boy Advance game I ever owned, and I played the thing to death on a screen without a backlight where I could hardly make out a damn thing because it was too dark, and I still loved it. But after multiple games across the Game Boy Advance and then the DS that have built on this formula, well, you can definitely tell where and why they built on the formula, I'll put it that way. It's a good game, but it's not one that I find myself enjoying half as much as I used to, or as much as either of the other 2 on offer here. As mentioned, however, this is a game that seems to hit people completely differently, depending on who's playing it. Going over some of those CastleVania listicles, I've seen this game rated as one of the best games, and I've seen it listed as one of the worst. Make your bloody mind up, internet people who do lists. I don't have time to decide for myself. Harmony of Dissonance, equally, falls into the same category when it comes to lists. People seem to either slap it at the top or at the bottom. There's no in-between with this one, but for me, it removes the stuff I dislike and it adds in stuff I do like. For one thing, you get this ridiculous dash move from the second you start. LB and RB are used to dash left and right, which is fantastic for avoiding things, but it's even more fantastic for just flying from one end of the castle to the other, apparently on a single foot. Slip sliding away. It looks stupid, but I don't care. Give me that speed. Let me get from A to B in as little time as possible. If I can play CastleVania as a Ferrari, I would. I'm just that kind of person. This rapid pace brings with it a few things. It's much easier to avoid stuff, which makes the game easier. Leveling isn't half as prominent as it was in Circle of the Moon, or at least grinding isn't as much of an issue. There are far fewer difficulty spikes. Potions actually do something. I mean, look how much health I get back from this potion in Circle of the Moon.
My disappointment is immeasurable. And my day is ruined.
I might as well be drinking bloody Lucozade. Now, look at this in Harmony of Dissonance.
Great job.
That's more like it. That's a proper potion, that is. Now, keep in mind that in Harmony of Dissonance, you also seem to get a lot more drops for health items like this, and there's even a merchant that you can buy more from. And that leads me to say that if there's one thing you can level at Harmony of Dissonance, the difficulty is fairly entry level. There are tough bits, sure, but after playing Circle of the Moon again, the difference between the two is fairly noticeable. Gameplay mechanic wise, gone is the card system and in comes the spellbook system, which is much easier to deal with. The spellbooks are found within the castle like any other item, and turning them on will affect your sub-weapons in various ways. It's not quite as engaging or imaginative as the card system, but it is a lot less hassle, and I found myself using it more as a result. It's fine, it'll do. It makes the game stand out from the others, and that's really what you want in a game like this. In terms of the castle itself, it's a bit of a weird one. It doesn't feel quite like a traditional CastleVania castle when dealing with the exploration side. You'll often find that the game is almost looping you around a small segment of the castle before warping you somewhere else entirely, and these different areas eventually do start to fall back in on themselves. In addition to that, you then find that the castle has two different sides, both of which are built into the same map, effectively making the castle twice as big to explore, because each room has an A side and a B side to it. It's good though, I like it. Next game. CastleVania Aria of Sorrow is great. It's the best one, I don't care what anyone says, it is wonderful. Here you have the same formula again, but the RPG mechanics have been ramped up. There's more customization on offer, and it means you can really play through the game in different ways each time. That comes down to two things. You're not just stuck with a whip. You can swap out your weapon for anything that you find in your adventure, each with its own attack animations, damage, and everything else. You also get random soul drops from enemies, which are used as your powers. Hearts and sub-weapons are gone here and replaced by this wonderful system where you literally steal the souls of enemies and use their tactics against them. 3 different types of souls can be attached. One will take the place of your sub-weapon, one will usually be a utility item that you can use on the R trigger, and one is generally passive. This is my favourite of the CastleVania systems for the Game Boy Advance, and whenever I can't quite decide which one to go back and play, this game usually pips it for the sheer variety it has on offer. There are so many things I could say about all 3 games, new characters to unlock, secrets to find, but I wouldn't really want to ruin the spicy surprises for anyone who hasn't played them. If you've never delved into these games before, I can't recommend them enough. They are delightful, endless games that all do the Castlevania name justice, and even if the next game wasn't included, these 3 would be more than worth the entry price. So that does leave our final game, Dracula X, a bit of an oddity considering the other titles here. For one, it didn't come out on the Game Boy Advance, it came out initially on the PC Engine, but was then remade for the SNES, with redesigned levels and some altered gameplay bits and bobs. Since then, it's been re-released on quite a few systems, but it's nice to see it included here because it's really bloody good. As far as traditional Castlevania style games go, it may well be on a par with Super Castlevania for me, but once again, I'm sure it's either the best or the worst Castlevania you've ever played based on how the internet rates things, so who bloody knows. Anyway, as I say, this is a very traditional Castlevania, and if you want to know what a traditional Castlevania is like to play, I think this probably sums it up.
Victory!
It is brutal. You will think it's impossible, but with perseverance, you'll push further and further ahead. Unlike the other games in this collection, Dracula X is 60% skill and 40% memory. You can, with a little luck, scrape through levels by the skin of your teeth, but the real challenge in the game comes from continuous repetition. Knowing where your enemies are, knowing when to jump, knowing not to throw yourself off the edge of a bloody cliff. Combine this with precision timing and ability to think on the fly, and you've got yourself a gorgeous looking CastleVania that doesn't get as much love as it deserves. This is a game that seems impossible, but it can be completed by anyone. And I truly mean that. It is a game that simply requires you to smash your head against it until it dies, but in a good way. And that, folks, is the CastleVania Advanced Collection. To repeat what I've already said, it's ruddy good value, even at full price. Are there things that could have been added? Yes. I think the gadget system is a bit half-baked and works in a way which I can only describe as pretty dumb in 66% of the games it's added into. That should definitely be fixed, because the idea behind it is great, but the execution is bananas. I also think that they should have gone a bit further with this. One of the things you'll find yourself doing in Metroidvania, CastleVania games, God, please, someone invent a new game description for that. One of the things you'll find yourself doing is constantly bringing up a map to check where you are and where you need to go. It would have been nice to have a gadget option to put a little mini-map in one of the top corners. If you're playing the game in a non-stupid format, then there's plenty of retail space to fit this in, so it's strange that it's not an option. Maybe even a little summary system of your stats and stuff down the side instead of Victorian wallpaper. That would have been nice too, but whatever. These things are fluff when you consider that these games are still amazing regardless of how they could have been presented. If you are planning on picking it up on PC, there's a link in the description below, and Konami have personally told me, sort of, I didn't actually speak to them, but they basically said if you use that link, then it'll prove that I'm a real person or something, which is ominous. Anyway, CastleVania, it's good, innit? Go and buy it.